What's up everyone, Tanner here, creator of Kryptik. Kryptik is the world's first community-developed trading card game, and today I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on the rules. Let's start with the basics. You use your citizens and spell cards in the game of Kryptik to destroy your opponent's 11-year cards. If you hit them one more time after they have no 11-year cards, you win the game. One of the most unique and beautiful things about Kryptik is you don't need any dice or tokens to play, just your cards. To start the game, you just shuffle your deck, you take the top 6 cards of your deck, put them in your 11-year row. These are considered your 11-year cards. More on this later. Each player then draws 6 cards from the top of their deck. You can shuffle as many cards as you want out of those 6 back into your deck and draw that many. You can only do that once per game, and in this game we call that recurring your hand. Now I'm going to break down the phases of each turn. Disengage. At the beginning of your turn, you disengage all cards under your control unless a spell or ability says not to. Draw. Each player draws 1 card at the beginning of their turn. The only exception to this is the person that goes first does not draw a card on their first turn, and if you have 0 11-year cards left during this phase on your turn, you draw 2 cards. First phase. During this phase, you can play any card from your hand that you have the soul energy to play. You can also place 1 card per turn in your soul row upside down. This card becomes a soul card and can be engaged to produce soul energy to cast your cards. Keep in mind, you can only put 1 card in your soul row from your hand each turn unless a spell or ability says otherwise. Command attackers. During this phase, you command your citizens to attack your opponent. Citizens cannot attack the turn they are played unless they have Eager. Either player can also play spell cards from their hand during this phase, with the attacking player having spell casting priority. Command blockers. It's in this phase that the defending player chooses which citizens they'd like to block with. When you attack your opponent, you are not attacking their individual citizens, but their life. If they choose not to block you with a citizen, you destroy an 11-year card of your choosing. Battle damage happens simultaneously, and citizens with a defense that is equal to or lower than the opposing citizen's attack power die. Second phase. In this phase, you can play any cards from your hand that you have the soul energy to cast. You can also place a card in your soul row upside down to become a soul card if you have not done so yet this turn. End of turn. This is when the active player decides their turn is over and declares it. The opposing player has the ability to cast spell cards during this phase, and you have the opportunity to respond to those spells with your own spells or abilities as normal. Many of the cards in our first set, Genesis, have reminder text right on the card that tell you what their abilities do. If it doesn't and you don't know an ability, you can easily find it in the glossary that's in the back of our rulebook. I did want to mention one keyword in Kryptik because it does come up quite often. That keyword is short time. Short time in Kryptik means that you control less 11-year cards than any of your opponents. Being on short time is relevant to a lot of the cards and spells in our first set, Genesis. Now before we take a closer look at 11-year cards and how they function, I want to explain to you the zones of the game. Your hand is made up of the cards you hold, and the maximum hand size is 9. The island is the primary zone of the game, and that's where your citizen cards go when you cast them. The soul row is the one closest to you, and that's the row you put your cards in upside down to become soul cards. The 11-year row is right above your soul row, and it contains your 11-year cards. The 3 static zones of the game are the abolished pile, which is where cards go when they are abolished by spells or abilities, your main deck, which is your main 50+ card deck, and then the limbo pile, which is where citizens go when they die and spells go when they resolve. Now I'm going to explain a unique feature of Kryptik, 11-year cards. These 6 cards essentially function as shields and protect you from citizens' attacks. When you run out of these shields and a citizen attacks you unblocked, you lose the game. When an attacking citizen hits an 11-year card, the attacking player chooses which 11-year card they hit. The defending player then picks the 11 card up and in that moment decides if they'd like to cast it instantly for its 11-year cost. If they can't or don't wish to, the card then goes in their hand. Players are not permitted to look at 11-year cards unless spells or abilities specifically say they can. Now we're going to quickly go over the different sections of a Kryptik card. The card's name is in the upper left hand corner, and you can only have 4 copies of each card in your Kryptik deck. Its soul cost is in the upper right hand corner and contains the color and quantity of soul energy required to cast it. More on this later. The card type bar contains the card type and set symbol. Citizens cards bars also contain their faction. The ability box of a card is where you'll find a citizen's abilities and a spell's effects. Found only in the bottom left hand corner of the citizen cards is the battle box. This box contains 2 numbers separated by a /. The first number being the citizen's attack, the second number being the citizen's defense. The bottom bar of each card contains an hourglass symbol with soul stones next to it. These soul stones indicate the quantity and color of soul energy required to cast this card for its 11-year cost when it is destroyed as an 11-year card. And finally, in the bottom right hand corner of every card is the soul box. That box contains a soul stone that tells you the color or colors that card can produce. Refer to this box when the card is upside down in your soul row and you're using it to create soul energy to cast your cards. Just a couple more things to talk about and we're going to be ready to play a game of Kryptik. Let's go over how the soul energy color system works. Firstly, this is how soul stones work if they are in the card's soul cost or 11-year cost. If the stone is a solid color, it must be paid for by that specific color. If a stone in either of these costs is mixed, it can be paid for with either of the colors shown on the stone. Now we're going to talk about the stones found in the soul box of the card. Remember, the stones I just talked about are to cast the card. This stone we're about to talk about is what it can produce if it's a soul card in your soul row. Think of it as a resource of soul energy to cast your cards. If the stone in this box is solid, it can only produce the color shown. If the stone in this box is mixed, it can produce either of the colors shown. The final thing we're going to be going over in this video is how spells and abilities resolve in Kryptik. To decide how these spells and abilities resolve, we use what's called the effect pile. So spells and abilities resolve in order of last played to first played. So those spells and abilities see the current status of all zones and cards in the game at the time of their resolution, not at the time they are cast. Well, that should give you enough information to play your first game of Kryptik. If you want to go more in depth, or if you have questions, check out our rulebook on our website. I'm going to put it on the screen now. It's also in the description below. Thank you so much for playing our game. We'll see you next time. Peace.